G'day, Spirit host, AoS coach here, and we are coming from the underworld to talk to you about the new book. We have a new battle tome. I'm trying to grab it and I'm making a mess of it. So Nighthaunt has a new book, and I am absolutely blessed to be talking to the Night Queen herself, Ronya Andersson, who played in AoS Worlds. She was a part of Team Sweden, general butt kicker from the Mortal Realms. I hear you are on the way to be claiming the throne of Sweden if it wasn't for Konstantinos, but I hear this time you're going to get him.
This time I'm going to get him for sure.
But we're going to talk Nighthaunt. You get him. He's slacking off. But we're talking about this new book, 2022 Nighthaunt. You got a new book, and boy, oh boy, is Nighthaunt looking good. You have absolutely, I don't know what happened, but you went from this fringe faction that was kind of like struggling a little bit, snipe the heroes, armies crumble, to one of probably at the moment one of the meta leaders. But before we get into the book and the lists and getting Ronya's thoughts around how she's looking at the game, how are you? And welcome to the channel. And do you want to tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Hey, thanks. I'm doing all right, or good even. Just waiting for vacation to kick off in a couple of days. Oh, sorry. What was the question then? Like,
just for people who don't know who Ronya is, you're in Sweden, right?
Yeah, I'm in the northern part of Sweden. Bursted onto the AoS scene like September last year, so quite new to the hobby, but have played miniature games since I was 7, so that will be 22 years now. Hopped on the War Machine train back in when Games Workshop nuked the old world. I played Warhammer Fantasy before, but then War Machine then got really competitive, and yeah, ended up doing well in War Machine, which translates very well into AoS, which we have seen with multiple players have come into AoS and just
I was going to say Tom, for example,
Tom
in America,
is
Tom
a
won.
good example on that. Yeah, we have Johan and Geir and a few others, like old AoS or old War Machine players who are just doing the same thing they did in a War Machine in AoS.
What made you jump over to AoS?
It was mainly how Private Press, who makes War Machine, handled the pandemic. They like stopped all the game development, combined with having shipping issues to Europe, so the game kind of died off here. Also, the community in AoS is larger, but essentially the same as in War Machine. So it was an easy switch to make.
Yeah, I heard there was some issues with MK3, but now, like literally the last 24 hours, MK4 has been announced. So hopefully we don't lose you back to War Machine.
I'm kind of excited for it.
No, you stay. All right, I'm going to quickly move off topic and let's talk Nighthaunt. So you got a new book, it's updated. What were your thoughts? Do you like the new book? Is it fundamentally different? Like, what's your general, just high-level view of the new book?
Initially, I was really skeptic because I thought it wouldn't fit my playstyle as well as the old book did, given there was just a single list in the old book that was playable at a high level, or 2 lists. You could bring a Mega Gargant and like have some kind of chance in the high levels as well, other than the one I played with Black Coaches and Hexwraith, those poor quality models that had so much synergy that it actually worked. New book though, there isn't a single war scroll that I think is weak, or what? There are 2 war scrolls I think is weak, but they have like their spot still. Like it's the Glaiwraith Stalkers and the Scriptor Mortis and the Crossbowmans, who I'm not that fond of, but all other war scrolls has their place in the army, I think. And that's an army that's really strong.
When I got the book, I was hoping and praying that the crossbows would get a sub-allegiance ability that would get something special, some hero combination that would make them good. And I was so disappointed because, like, I remember getting the book and I'm like, okay, the Scriptum Mortis kind of has its place, but it's expensive. I think for the points that you get, it's very expensive for the Scriptum Mortis. But I was praying the crossbows. And we'll talk about the units that you like and the units you don't like. I know there's a whole bunch of new units as well, so I'd love your thoughts as well. And even like the Cruciator changed roles a little bit too. It used to be that 5-up ward bubble and...
That was a major change for the whole faction, especially going into this GHB, since you will have mostly Gallivets, and reducing the damage people get from Bounty Hunter will be really, really important. I think that piece should be in most lists that want to play as well, if not all of them.
That's probably good context to add before we get into the list discussion. First off, this is competitive. So if you have a particular favorite model and Alinda is your favorite model, but we say that it's not very good right now, we're not saying don't run it. You do you. It's more that we're looking at this very like a tournament competitive point of view. The other caveat is that we are talking about General's Handbook 2022, Season 1. So we're talking about Galetian veterans. We're talking about bonds of battle. We're talking about bounty hunters. And if you're watching this video in like 6 months' time and we're in a new General's Handbook, just have that mindset that things might change a little bit here and there. And we'll probably add some context and some flavor, but we're putting obviously the bounty hunter and just some of the rules that are in the current GBH. But generally, how have you found the faction? Are you liking the new build? Are you thinking it's better? Is it worse? Is it fundamentally different? We saw Nurgle, for example, go from a very fast army to a very slow army. Like, what's your take between books?
It's for sure better. It's a bit, in general, it's faster, but it's slower than the list I used to play, because I was used to movement 12, 15, or 17, like insane speed, which you don't really see anymore in the Nighthaunt book. But you get more teleports, kinda, at least. You got more mobility in your like in the general models, like they moved from speed 6 to speed 8 base, which is a big change. It doesn't make it faster, but having retreat and charge combined with all the other rules we will get into is huge for the list as well. Something I was really missing retreat and charge in the old book, actually. So that's a nice touch. It's an insane rule. Like it's not just good, it's like one of the best rules a model can have, I think. Especially when they're as durable as the Nighthaunt models. Always having a 4-up followed by a 6 or a 5 is, you can tank so much damage with them.
And probably one of the other big changes as well that I noticed, well, probably we all noticed, is how in the old book you were very hero reliant. And I know the number one strategy back in the day was just shoot the heroes, and no army crumbled probably faster than Nighthaunt when you shot off or killed the heroes, because so much of your buffs and your allegiances and the wards and the regeneration and all this stuff happen based around your heroes. Now they've kind of less hero reliant, still important, but not nearly as reliant on safeguarding and protecting your heroes.
Yeah, completely agree. I'm happy they are doing that for all death factions, because they're doing it for Feck, they're doing it for Soul Blight has their grave sites as well. Nighthaunt get there just in general. So I'm happy they like make the factions less hero reliable.
I just want to clarify one thing
in
too.
Like edition where infantry or the last one has been monster faction, like you don't want heroes in Nighthaunt. You couldn't get monsters, it wouldn't matter, but still you don't really want to invest that much in heroes or leaders or whatever.
And by the way, Hazel, no, we're not saying it goes in the bin. Nighthaunt is great. Very, very powerful. And if you're not playing Nighthaunt and you're listening to this, you definitely want to be thinking about how you defeat Nighthaunt, because they're definitely a meta leader. And the way that you defeat Nighthaunt may be fundamentally different. Everyone's talking about Purple Sun right now and freaking out about, popping more crushes with a roll of a 1. But to pop a hero in Nighthaunt is very hard because there's so much bodyguarding. and you don't care. You don't care nearly as much as other factions.
I got my banshees. They keep me safe. That's fine.
Yes. So there were a couple of new units, and I'm going to go into the allegiance abilities and the way you're thinking about things very shortly. But one thing I want to talk about is there were a bunch of new units in the book. Some of them came from the Arena of Shades, some of them came after it. So I'd love your thoughts just around, for example, is it Ulrich the Drowner, the new boat man that's not the endless spellboat man?
Exactly. I like the look of him. Like he has a decent punch with his rowing stick or whatever it's called. Like Ren 2 base and D3 damage or something like that. I do prefer Kurdos over him, but he brings mobility to a list that I think is really, really good to have. Like he's useful and might be worth his point, because 175 points for one character, it's a bit on the pricey side, but he for sure has play.
You do get the teleport from the boatman, which used to be as a part of what was the horseman? Is it the Knight of Shrouds? It used to be the teleport in the past. Now that kind of changed. The Dreadblade,
yeah, teleport himself, and then I've heard stories of Mark or Grieving Legions where you like teleport around grave sites and you bring back models. It would be nice to have nowadays as well.
And by the way, Liam in the chat, 100%. Me and my Banshees right now are hot. If I was running Nighthaunt right now with the amount of endless spells that are happening, to get a second chance to unbind, obviously use an unbind in your hero phase if you're unsuccessful, and those endless spells end within 6 inches of immune mon Banshee, getting the second chance to remove those Geminids, whatever it might be, very, very good right now. We'll find out pretty soon if Ronya's got them in her list. Mm-hmm. What about the Scriptum Mortis?
I'm not fond of him. Like, the game is usually decided on turn 2 or 3, and his impact comes in like turn 4 or 5 or end of the game. So I think it's a good ID, a good character ID, but he's way too slow at doing what he is supposed to do for the list.
Yeah, like initially I was thinking, this could be a really good way. And like the meta has changed so much. And, there was these super tanky heroes back in the day, and be able to pull down, let's say, pick a Mega Gargant and be chipping away mortal wounds, that had the potential. But just being able to roll under the turn order and all of that weird stuff, it's too much variability for me. Now that I've thought about it a lot more, I love the idea. I just like, how do I get to access to those mortal wounds earlier? What about the crossbows? The crossbow, the Craven Throne Guard. They were a new shooting unit. You haven't really had a lot of shooting in Nighthaunt.
No. Like shooting in death isn't really a thing in general, I think. Not long range and good shooting like you see in Stormcast or Seraphon or some other faction. It's just, and when you don't have any other shooting, like bringing in one unit that's like they are pretty poor at shooting as well. Like, I'm not gonna sugarcoat them. I think they're all awful. Like, they are too expensive. Only 5 model, like 5 wounds for 115 points. That doesn't really do anything. Could bring in like a 10-man of the Shengra's Horde instead, because I think the best job they will do is be a screen, and they are just 5 wounds. So not good enough of a screen.
Yeah, like I remember looking at the profile there. They don't have a lot of they don't do mortal wounds. They don't have a high rend attack. They were relatively short range as well. So obviously, to teleport, come in close range, they're good. But the amount of damage, and look, maybe if this Horde meta kind of continues on, and like at the moment we're in a bounty hunter meta, we haven't really actually hit this Horde meta. Maybe they become good later. Maybe.
I doubt it. If they go back to like the initial rules where they had mortal wounds on 6s, like the old Frightful Touch, maybe, but with the current rule set, nah, they won't be played. It's unfortunate, but yeah, it is what it is. You can't have everything be good, like in a book, right?
No, and most of this stuff is good. So actually, let's get into the good stuff. And what I might bring up here is your allegiance abilities. And we're going to go through some of the new things. Obviously, your match play battle tactics and your grand strat. The new processions, I think that was really cool. You know, we got introduced to, was it the Emerald Host and there was the other one?
Was the two
Ragnar's
that
Condemned.
existed.
We got introduced to two of those through the Broken Realm series. Crazy that Nighthaunt previously didn't have any sub-factions in the past. Ironically enough, Legion of Grief was the first sub-faction that wasn't even yours. But you have a bunch of sub-factions. You've got the Grieving Legion, Emerald Host, Scarlet Doom, and Quicksilver Dead. We're going to pause on that one because the next screen does have these rules, and I'll get your thoughts around it. But Ronya, as we go through the allegiance abilities, I'd love to hear from you as a Nighthaunt player. What do you like? What don't you like? Are these things that you build your list around? Are these things that you know, like how do you think about these certain rules and, you know, take advantage of them? So first off, you have the Aura of Dread. So enemy units are terrified if they're within 3 inches of a friendly Nighthaunt unit. And what that means is if the unit is terrified, it cannot issue or receive Inspiring Presence command. And that obviously has no effect to Nighthaunt. So you essentially, within 3 inches, shut down issuing or receiving Inspiring Presence. What does that mean for you? Good, bad, something you leverage?
With Nighthaunt being a melee army, I think this rule is fantastic. For the army, it makes it like it turns it up to 11 essentially, because they are really good in melee, like probably the best melee faction there is right now, because they're kind of durable while also packing a punch, much thanks to Wave of Terror. But also being terrified, there's a few triggers in the book that requires people to be terrified. For example, the Cruel Guys reduce damage aura. People need to be terrified for it to work, so it's vital to the book that this like allegiance ability is there for it like to work as well as it does.
Is this something that you'd build around? Like, are you going to look for other bravery debuffs? You know, whether it might be, is it the Horrorghast Endless Spell? There's a whole bunch of ways you can reduce bravery, because then that obviously like extrapolates and makes it even better.
They have removed most abilities from the old book that affected bravery or that like did damage based on bravery. So no, I wouldn't go for a negative bravery kind of build in Nighthaunt anymore. I tried in the old book. It was okay, I suppose, but there's nothing you build around, no.
Yeah,
It
look,
will just be there as a bonus.
It's a great rule, especially with there's a lot of like multi-wound troops, especially as a lot of people are going into, say, bounty hunters right now, putting in, you know, elite units that can do high damage. If you can start putting things terrified, start doing a bit of damage, all of a sudden not being able to issue or receive Inspiring Presence means you're going to be able to cut through them significantly just in battle shock, let alone what you do through other phases in the game. Cool. All right, nothing else there from Lauren. I don't. Let's make sure I want to cut you off. You got the ethereal rule. So you mentioned, you know, you got a 6-up ward. So that is just fundamental, not tied to a hero anymore, which is awesome. And you also can retreat and charge. You obviously also ignore modifiers, both positive and negative. So Mystic Shield means nothing. Cover means nothing, but it also means Ren doesn't mean anything. So what does ethereal mean to you, and how are you taking advantage of ethereal?
Ethereal, as I mentioned earlier, probably the best rule there is with retreat and charge. It make like without it, I don't think the faction would be a thing, even because having 4-up save on everything, like I think they have accounted for ethereal when making the faction, obviously. Otherwise, we could also benefit from 3-up saves and have 2-up heroes with all-out defense and all that. So it's like, but also like it makes you ignore a part of the game that is rend. Like I've played Nighthaunt since I started, so now I tried another list this weekend in League of the First Prince. Having to care about rend, that's a whole other game. It's a cheat rule, but it's a really good one, so I like it.
As an opponent, I really at the moment, especially in the last edition in General's Handbook 2021, there was a lot of elite units running around in the game, very high armor saves, 2-up, 3-up, 4-ups, and obviously a lot of save stacking that was available. So a lot of people went down the mortal wound and the rend route, rend 2, rend 3. And, being a Suns player, I would always get stuck playing Nighthaunt because I just don't do enough damage, because I do high damage, high rend, but I've got to get through your 4-up armor save, which is always a challenge, right? But as an opponent right now, especially with the rise of Nighthaunt, I need to be thinking about volume as much as mortal wounds and rend. So when I build up my list, I need to find a source of high quality attacks that are, I don't care about rend, because otherwise I'm not going to chew through that unit of 20 or even 30 chain wraths or whatever it might be. And that can be very, very tough. But one thing I do want to talk to you about, because this might be an oversight to some players who are listening to this and maybe don't understand the power of retreat and charge. So talk to me about why this is such a good rule to you, and how do you use it, and how do you look at it? Maybe if someone doesn't really understand why you'd want to retreat and then charge again.
I've always been a player who plays the movement game instead of, like, the movement game is the most important part of any miniature games I played, in my opinion. Even if combat is, like, you need to be able to remove stuff as well. Something the old book struggled with because there was no hammers. In this book, thanks to retreat and charge and variable terror, any unit could be a hammer. In this book, hammer.
It allows you to get out of unfavorable combats. It allows you to slingshot away from a combat onto an objective. It does. There's so much benefit in retreat and charge, and I think for a lot of people, when you get into combat, most people just want to fight their way out of combat, and that's their goal, right? But there's been plenty of times where you'd hit the charge and then retreat, and especially if you get a double turn or whatever it might be, you can then better position yourself into maybe off one of the screens into a juicier target, get into that backfield hero, get into that squishy wizard, get into something because you've hit the initial line, and then kind of move yourself out with your retreat and charge. It's a lot of movement.
Yeah, especially from one of my favorite units, it's the Hexwraith, who does that with movement 12. So they get like over the unit and possibly charging something vital in the backline.
Yeah, and it's like, Hazel mentioning, things like the Ethereal and Cruciator combining really nicely, just being able to reduce the amount of damage. There is so much tricks in Nighthaunt that I absolutely love. It's not Iron Jaws. You just can't push them forward and like smash and bash. It's very much like a scalpel approach, but it's very forgiving. I think that's probably one thing I love about Nighthaunt, is that it's because of the durability, it can be very forgiving as a faction.
I think in the new book it's really, really forgiving and nearly like Iron Jaws, that you can push everything forward as long as like you are aware where you put your characters. It will debuff or buff, depending on which one it is.
As Aaron's saying in the chat, you are absolutely stacked when it comes to allegiance abilities and little benefits you get in this book. So absolutely dig it. You've got anything else you'd mention on Ethereal, or should we get into Discorporate?
We could go for Discorporate.
Cool. What do you think? So you can use this command ability with a friendly Nighthaunt unit is picked as a target of a shooting or a combat phase. That unit must receive the command. You essentially get a 5-up ward instead of a 6-up ward. So, so basically, yeah. What does that mean?
I just felt like it was nice to have some kind of defensive tech for using the command abilities. since we can't benefit from like all out defense or those, we got this instead, which it was a nice touch, I think. And this used to be like the Cruel Guest Crusader. This was his thing to do, like give 5 up ward within 12 inches of him, or hold win. But it was really unreliable before because he needed to damage with his range attack to trigger it. So this salvation was nice for the army.
And it's
Possibly
obviously already
too strong with everything that's sugar, like all the layers on top of this. It's possibly too strong, yeah.
And for example, those layers, right? So just to talk about, like Hayes already mentioned, right? You've got the Cruciator, so you'll be able to reduce the damage by 1. You then add the 6-up ward, put Disincorporate on, and that's now a 5-up ward. You've got a 4-up base armor save that can't be reduced by rend. So all of a sudden, you've got this incredible tanky unit that if you double reinforce or single reinforce, you've got a lot of bodies, a lot of wounds. You just don't disappear. And then you can regenerate and there's some cool stuff you can do. So that to me is such a great... Is there any particular units that you like to use them on more than others? Obviously, it's game dependent.
It's very game dependent, yeah. Very turn dependent as well. Which unit is the one that needs to stay there this turn, or which can't falter. So it varies a lot. Yeah.
It can be a great defense as well if your opponent has maybe a battle tactic or a grand strategy that's tied onto killing your battle line, killing a particular hero, whatever it might be. You can go, cool, I'm just going to throw down Disincorporate, and maybe you burn 2 CP both in shooting and combat and just make them ultra tanky.
People in general do underestimate how tanky stuff gets with all these layers of defensive tech. Yeah.
Especially because we've got this unrenderable armor save before this part, right? So
yeah, that makes up for a lot of the, like it takes away so much damage, especially since elite attacks is kind of favored in the meta, or has been at least for the last half or 9 months that I've played. But we'll see how with the Sylvaneth and Skaven and all that on the horizon might not be a thing anymore. That it might be hordes, time for hordes, which would be fun.
Maybe.
I love a good army, like a big army of goblins or rats or whatever.
A couple of weeks ago, I ran 120 idiot goblin battle line, so I'm ready for the goblin meta. Take me to goblin meta, but let's not talk about that too much because Nighthaunt people might get upset with me. You've got Frightful Touch, so you got the unmodified hit roll is a 6. It does it automatically wounds the target, so there's no wound roll. Thoughts on that one?
I missed the all Frightful Touch as my thoughts on that one.
Was that mortals?
Yeah, it was mortal on 6. It would be totally busted for the whole army to have mortals on 6s. But the army I played was mortals on 6s, basically on every model that wasn't a character. So I do miss that reliable damage that you had. Like you have 35 attacks. Okay, I'll do at least 5 mortal wounds, probably, or 6. But so there isn't as reliable damage as it used to be, but it's less spiky now, and it's more. I think it's in line with the faction. And it's just a bone. The faction could do without this Frightful Touch rule, for sure, and be doing just as well. It's just almost an unnecessary rule they have just gotten on top.
Before we get to the next rule, I've got an interesting question that's come up from chat, and that is, Ronya, love from Poland. How easy was it transitioning from War Machine to AoS, and why does the WTC players, why are they taking over the AoS meta? Shots fired.
I give it a chance, Tomas. You join me at the next Worlds. You and me in the finals, just like in War Machine.
Love it. You got vanishing phantasms. I probably already butchered that. This at the end of the deployment, before determining control of the objectives, you can remove 3 friendly Nighthaunt units from the battlefield and place them to the side. That's a big change, right? Because back in the old book, you were 1 for 1. You put down 1 unit on the battlefield, then 1 unit could be in the underworlds. Now it's just 3.
Yeah, but I think 3 is usually enough. Usually I used to play with like 2 or 3 units in the underworld. So yeah, it's basically the same as it was before, with the exception that you actually put them down and then remove them, which in some missions isn't allowed. You can't remove like things and have a reserve, but it gets around the other ones where you can't have reserves, so it like evens it out, I guess.
So when you look at vanishing phantasms, when you look at this, right, with the 3 units, do you always put down 3 units in reserve? Are there units that you like to put into reserve more than others? Like, how do you think about that particular rule?
I usually put at least 1, but nearly never use the full 3, unless like I could use it like just to drop them down the first turn to have them a unit at speed 8 might get like 16 inches of movement turn 1 because I put them in reserve instead, and I use it mainly that way. But I tend to keep at least 1 unit in the underworld until turn 3, or if they have a good place on turn 2, and then it's usually like a 10 man of Grimgast Reaper, 10 man of whatever like the base infantry is in the list I play. So
And just a clarity, folks, I was just quickly looking. That's a spelling mistake from me. It's 9 inches, not 8 inches. If you're looking at the screen here, it says you've got to set up within outside of 9 inches. So apologies there. Don't think it's some cheeky little 8-inch rule. It's 9. Apologies there. But you're right. Like when it comes to this particular unit, obviously it's matchup dependent, right? If you come up against a heavy shooting, you can protect your hero by taking it off the board and kind of protecting it. Or if there's a critical particular unit you want to kind of protect, it's a great way of stealing an objective, depending on the battle plan, depending on what battle tactics are available to you. It's a good defensive piece. And more importantly, there's a psychology as well, as your opponent will try to deploy and screen you out. And it's always hard to, especially if you've got like a small unit with a small footprint, it becomes very hard to screen an opponent out. So you can stretch an opponent and try to get them to kind of deploy in ways they wouldn't normally deploy. And then obviously like you get to take advantage of that, right? Because movement, and you've got a lot of movement tricks.
Yeah. Just the extra layer of thinking that you need to screen for a unit, screen your backline from like deep strike is also so
yeah, and as
good.
Jason's mentioning in the comments, like it's a free barge through enemy lines a lot of the time, right? Because you just got boom, you're in the backfield. There's a battle tactic.
If you're like, I've always played majority of my games on my opponent's table side, so if you struggle with that battle tactic, I think you're playing Nighthaunt wrong to start with. Is my like opinion on that one. So
Anton Sandstrom is asking, are you going to break Feck next? Is that your next faction?
I'm looking into maybe Feck, and I'm like, since there was the lowest like on the ranking thus far, only like a few events though. Feck might be next. It's also a death army, which is I'm a death or chaos player. Back in fantasy, I was 100% chaos, with a little bit death on the side. Now I'm the other way around. So I'll see. But
The last
Feck
set of
is...
rules, Feck's still on the table.
Yeah.
Right. Not that's like 12 months away. Ronya's committed to the Nighthaunt, folks. You've got Wave of Terror too. I want to talk. I do want to get to Wave of Terror because this to me is one of the most. I wouldn't say the most important, but it's one of the great Nighthaunt rules you want you want to learn and you want to take advantage of. And it's got some really interesting interaction, especially if you roll high. So I want to get to your thoughts there. So after a friendly Nighthaunt unit has finished a charge move, you can you take the unmodified charge roll and you compare it to the Wave of Terror table. And you get to pick one enemy unit within 1 inch of the Nighthaunt unit and then apply the relevant effect. Now, you can, if you roll high, just because I roll a 9 doesn't mean that I need to take stun. So if I roll high, I can choose from the table, equal or less, I guess. So the 3 rules are shriek, so that's subtract 1 from the hit rolls, stun is subtract 1 to save rolls, and then petrify is strike last. So thoughts, which one do you like? How do you like to use it? Give me your thinking.
First off, I love the new Wave of Terror because the old Wave of Terror was all or nothing, which is, and like it's 1/5 of your charge will be the double fighting as it was before, and then like otherwise you have nothing, which always felt bad when it happened too, but like it was always a bad feeling no matter what the charge roll was in the old book, because either feel bad for your opponent or you feel disappointed by your army. Nowadays you always get something, and it's just so much better and dynamic to play with. My favorite of these 3 is of course stun, because the faction still doesn't have like higher end on nearly anything. So having 1 or 2 stun each turn is really useful, and like stacking them with the charging. I essentially only try for stun, unless I'm engaging on multiple fronts. Then I try to petrify 1 unit and run stun as many as I can on the other ones.
So,
I use petrify, but situational use of petrify.
So just to talk about the stacking for a second. So if I charge in and I roll a 11, I don't get to apply all 3 of the modifiers. I get to choose one of them. But if I charge 2 units into the same enemy unit, I could put 2 effects of the Wave of Terror. I couldn't pick 2 stuns, but I could do stun and shriek, or petrify and shriek, or any combination, as long as I got 2.
You can pick 2 stuns as well.
Oh, can I?
Yeah, the minus armor stacks, so you can get -2 armor from 2 stuns, for example. That's what makes it so that any unit essentially can be a hammer in the list. Because if you have base rend of 1 on your Grimgust Reapers and you get 2 stuns, you go in with rend 3, 2 or 3 attacks each, so they will hurt a lot.
And obviously 6s will automatically wound as well, so you won't need to make the wound roll there with rend 2, rend 3. Put them in bounty hunters against a Galetian veteran, you're now doing lots and lots of damage. Cool.
Yep.
Anything else you'd mention with Wave of Terror?
Not really. It's just all ties together so nicely with the retreating charge the army has. Also, like the Wave of Terror rule makes it so that it doesn't feel as bad bringing a cheap 4-man unit, because they will still like apply an Wave of Terror effect and like help the rest of the army. That's why I really would like to try MSU in the Nighthaunt book. I just yet to get to that. There's a lot of things I want to try out in the new book, but I play very few practice games. I mainly play on tournaments.
You're that good, as Tomas said. You know, with your 100% win rate, you must be at 110% now that it's a much better book.
So far at the tournaments, at least with the Nighthaunt.
So we mentioned earlier that there were 4 sub 4. I'm putting 3 in the camera. Good, go me. There's 4 sub factions. The old ones are no longer available, so it means Ragnar's Condemned you can't use anymore. And that is Grieving Legion, Emerald Host, Scarlet Doom, and Quicksilver Dead. Do you like all four of them? Do you think that certain ones benefit certain types of builds, particular heroes attached? Like when you look at the sub-factions, talk to me about some of your thinking.
First off, I think 3 of them have play. Emerald Host is just like the Script and Mortist, too slow on making it affect like show in a match. But the other 3 are all really good, and it will like impact how you build your army. Like you won't do Quicksilver Dead without having any Dreadsight Herodins. And you won't do Scarlet Doom without any Bladegate's Revenants. Like the Grieving Legion is the one that opens up for the widest build, since it's not unit dependent, it's just unit size dependent. But the other ones are, and with like things being Gallivets if they are battle line nowadays, it's like both positive and negative to bring those sub-factions. And I think like with time, people will move away from the 50 Revenants in Scarlet Doom or 50 Herodins in Quicksilver Dead. There will be a more variety in the list. Personal favorite though, Grieving Legion. Brought that to the World Championship. Rocked the World Championship with my Grieving Legion. And I really like control and like when I can outplay my opponent, and having like 20-man units that you can't retreat from. They can just tag units when they charge something else. Like it opens up a lot of play there.
Yeah, I dig that. My last game against Nighthaunt was actually against Emerald Host, funnily enough. And I was playing Daughters of Cain, and my opponent had used the Emerald Curse on both Big Morathi and Little Morathi. So even without engaging, and even in turn one, Ronya's laughing already. You're just doing those 3 mortal wounds to Big Morathi and Little Morathi. So she was just going down, and I think she dropped by turn 3, I think. Mind you, I miscast and did the final wounds. I rolled 3 mortal wounds right at the end to go from 9 to 12. But previously, all of those mortal wounds and damage was coming from the Emerald Curse. So I think without Emerald Curse, I would have had Morathi till round 5. So that was a great little ability. But I am seeing a lot of Scarlet Doom. I am seeing a lot of Quicksilver Dead. I'm seeing a bit of Grieving Legion. I think it seems like everyone's kind of trialing it out a little bit.
Yeah.
I do like Emerald Host. Maybe it's just my experience that, they were able to like just target those key heroes and just whittle them down from the start.
Like it's a good idea, yes. But since it's like at the end of the battle round and on that D3 mortal wounds, like it's not that great. It's too slow.
It just reminds me of like Lord Croak doing those little chip mortal wounds in just, bringing down those minor heroes, very early on in the game.
But still, like, you have D3 plus 1 units. You get to pick 3 heroes. They can do heroic recovery on 1. A lot of factions have some kind of healing ability. So, like, I just feel it isn't as impactful unless you like really build for it. You can bring in like a Black Coach, the Scriptor, Olinder, do some chip damage on range, but then like, sure, you get an additional D3 mortal wounds on those models. I don't think it's not that great of a build still, even if yes, you can build for it.
Yeah, no. It's either way. It's good to see all 4 of them. I don't think any of them are trash. I think that's the key, right? Like even if that Emerald Host is not that good, probably compared to the others.
Nearly there at the trash tier, I think.
But it's not bad. It's for a D. It's not that bad. But like yes, there is the chance of rolling a 1, and you don't get anything for essentially your battle trait. But either way, a Grieving Legion is great. as long as you're building around multiple models. Dreadside Harridans are great. Bleedgeist Revenants are very good. I really like the Bleedgeist at the moment.
It was the most like straightforward, like this has this effect and it applies directly, and there's no real finesse to it other than picking a target. So I understand why that Scarlet Doom got so popular at the start. It's really easy to like make work. But with like Nurgle being top, Deepkin is kind of hot as well, and there's a lot of factions with ward saves. So I like the potential that Quicksilver Dead has. I think it's when the meta settles, I think it will be the better one than Scarlet Doom, because Scarlet Doom just makes Nighthaunt do what Nighthaunt does, but better. Quicksilver Dead adds another layer to it, even if it also increases damage output. But against things like Gotrek, he will just die. And same is true for Grieving Legion, I guess. It's like adds another layer to the Nighthaunt army rather than like improving what they are already good at.
Yeah. Look, I think you've made a really good point. Let's see how the meta settles. I don't think there's one that's bad. I think there are some that are better than others, but that's at the moment while we've got this kind of settling meta, and who knows what Zench and Lumineth they're going to bring to the table. So they might change things a little bit. But either way, yeah, I think Scarlet Doom for me personally. Grieving Legion, I think, is the other one. Although probably at most tournaments, you probably will find a lot of people won't retreat anyway. I just find a lot of players don't naturally go towards a retreat as a action. They want to fight themselves out of it. But when you're fighting at the top tables and good players want to be using the retreat, they can't.
Yeah, especially if you since you have such a large unit, you can just tag a unit. Like you put one model within 3 of a 20-man unit. Sure, they will fight with 2 models, and the rest will just stand there, and they don't have the option to retreat there. I think it can be really brutal if you play Grieving Legion correctly.
As someone who's played against Nurgle, who does that a lot, you get your sloppity bile piper, you get pinned, and if you tag, you're right, you tag one model and you stop the pile in this particular situation, you just don't get enough attacks in, and you can't retreat. It's an absolute pain. So absolutely dig that. You've got some extra rules when it comes to your match play rules. So you've got your grand strats and your battle tactics. Let's talk grand strategy. You've got 4 different options. Do you like these, or are you finding yourself going more towards the battle pack grand strategies?
I'm more towards the battle pack grand strategies. We are talking about, and we have played a tournament where we just doesn't allow the book tactics or strategies. I kind of like that, so I'm more looking in the core book for grand strategies. I don't think the Nighthaunt ones are that great, because in a lot of games I just table my opponent, and then there's I either table or there's something left, and if there's something left, fight or flight doesn't really work, because then it's pretty easy to contest objectives. Like there's big zones with like 6-inch radius, so just moving in on an objective is really easy. So that one kind of goes away unless you have like the final turn and you go second in the final turn.
If I forced you to take one of the grand strategies, would it be something like Feed on Terror? Now, that one's probably one of the easier ones, but it does force you to keep your enemy having some units on the table, having them terrified.
No, if I had to pick one, it would be Fright or Flight.
So when the battle ends, you complete the grand strategy if there are no enemy units within 6 inches of a friendly Nighthaunt unit contesting an objective.
Yeah. That would be the one. Assault to Claim is also like possible, I suppose, because every unit is an anvil. So it being a summonable unit that has to destroy the highest wound target isn't that big of a deal. And if the opponent like keeps their highest wound profile out of the game, it's usually quite good for you during the game. So that one is also okay.
I was just reading the text to dismantle the brave. It's you've got to pick an enemy unit with the highest bravery characteristic as the target. If one or more of those has a the same bravery, you obviously get to pick. You score it if you slay that high bravery target, and your general isn't slain.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
usually end up using my characters at like in the later stage of the game, like to hold someone up or something like. I sacrifice my characters a lot at the end of the game, so it's an okay grand strat, but it's not really for me at least.
Yeah, a Twisted Tree, I agree with you. Feed on Terror, in theory, is a good one, right? You just got to have someone terrified that is just having one of your units within 3 inches of a unit. That's awesome. But yes, then the caveat is that, by the end of the battle, you got to make sure that they've got some units still on the table. We know that if you're terrified, you also can't issue or receive Inspiring Presence. So to get them terrified, super easy. To keep them at the end of the game and still
Harder.
around, that's where it becomes really hard. So yes, I agree with you. I wanted to talk through the process. Easy becomes hard. And as Hannah's saying in the chat, as a Skaven player, I don't like the no retreating. So
yeah, but the scare away does override Grieving Legion's no retreat as of the FAQ Games Workshop have. So both of those, Scare Away and the Furious Flight instead of Fight thingy, overrides it. So Skaven are not that like poor. It's not. Skaven has a horrible matchup into Nighthaunt just in general.
I was gonna say their bravery is pretty bad. So
yeah, that's. It was worth with all Nighthaunt book when Olinder just would shriek at every unit within like 12 against their bravery, and then force a battle shock test on the whole Skaven army. That is one of the most silly games I've played. It's like Olinder running forwards towards the Skaven army, and they're like just like letting her pass as if they were the Red Sea and she was Moses. They just open up like, oh, it was horrible.
Talk to me about the battle tactics. I'm not going to go through every battle tactic. So you've got what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You got 6 battle tactics. Are there ones that you use more often than others, or are there ones that you use in certain situations, whether it's at the top of the game, late game? How do you look at your battle tactics?
I think most of them play into the Nighthaunt, or they are really tailored for the Nighthaunt list, because they are really like the Nighthaunt playstyle is we fight with everything essentially, and like Tides of Terror, having 2 friendly units within half an inch of the same unit. Sure, you need to leave something alive, and preferably have like the last pile-in move so that you make sure that you have 2 units within half an inch or something. Mass Panic is also really good, since like 3 terrified units. Like if you engage a lot of units, you have ensured that you have Mass Panic succeeded, and also the one-stop no return. With the new GSB, I thought Black Coach would be like in basically every list, because this just the old Conqueror, but with the Black Coach essentially. But the more I played in UHB, the easier I think the battle tactics are for an army like Nighthaunt, because a lot of them revolves around being aggressive and like clashing with your opponent and killing stuff, which is exactly what Nighthaunt wants to do. So it's, yeah, I think these are, yes, they are not needed for the faction. So it's just another layer that's like, it makes the faction so good if you can use this. It's not Daughters of Cain good that you get extra points, but still having the options are really nice.
Overwhelmed with Dread as well is probably one that you've got to set it up properly to ensure that the unit receives shriek, stun, and petrify. But there's a lot of failure points.
There's
in this.
easy to fail. Yeah. When I play, I try to like play as if I would roll a 1 on each die. Like I want to cut the dice game out as much as possible. And I think that's how you consistently like plays well. You don't rely on the dice. Also, why I hated playing Lino the First Prince this weekend, because they rely on dice. But getting sidetracked. Yeah.
No.
Relying on rolling a 10, like rolling a 10 for the charge is no. I would never choose that one unless I was sure I couldn't succeed anyone else. Yeah. It's too dicey.
Yeah, it seems good in theory, but when you then get into the rolls, you've got to get that. You've got to get at least one of those 10s on the charge, and you also want to make sure you don't clog yourself up and block off one of the charges. Right, you need to get 3 successful charges, and you need to roll at least one of them. So obviously situational. There are some better than others. You don't run a black coach, obviously that one disappears. Otherwise, they're mostly generic enough and not too hard to score. But some of them, as you've mentioned, like Overwhelm the Dread, does have some failure points.
Yeah. Sure do. And same with Ceaseless Nightmare. Like since you like out succeed Battle Shock on a 1, if I remember correctly, right?
Yeah, you've got
a thing. Or am I making that one up?
I think you're making that one up. I think we're making that one up.
Great.
It might be late
for me then.
I don't remember. Is that an AoS 1 rule?
I don't know. I didn't play AoS 1 or 2. I just you used to like in a lot of games like 6s out to succeed and 1s out to fail. This would be the other way around. So I just assumed something.
It's a late night for me. Maybe it's still there. I don't know. I don't think so. I think so. Confusing me. Ronya, there's so much in this book, right? And we're not going to get the chance to talk about every single combination. And I'm very, very keen to hear your thoughts around, like Alinda, for example. I know one of the questions from my Discord was, what's the pros and cons on running Alinda? She's obviously a wonderful model. She is a lot of points. She's a unique model. We are going to go through 2 lists. The first one is your Grieving Legion list, and you've gone with take what's theirs. The list is Alinda, as we've mentioned. You've got Shade Mist as your spell. You've got Kurdos Valentian, who's the Craven King. You've also got the Krulgas Cruciator, who's the general with Master of Magic, Arcane Tome, and Seal of Shaiish. You've got yourself 20 Grimmies. You've got 10 Grimmies. You've got 5 Hex Wraiths, 10 Chain Wraths, 3 Spirit Hosts, 4 Mirmon Banshees, wrapped up in Bounty Hunters and Battle Reg. 2,000 points on the nose, 103 wounds for 3 drops. So talk me through, like, what's this list? How does it work? What's the combinations here? Why does it look the way that it looks?
Yeah, this is actually the list I brought to the World Championship. Just changed the grand strategy to the new book and added bounty hunters instead of hunters of the heartland. New JSB, I really like 3 drops. Because in like 85% to 90%, you do get to choose who goes first playing that.
And by the way, Stefan in the chat mentioning demons often have the 1 auto passes battle shock, so Plague Bearers. So thank you, Stefan. I knew I've seen it, but I'm like, no, it's not a universal rule. Like, where am I thinking about it? Yes, it's demons.
The Triumph as well could like auto pass. I think because you don't get Inspiring Presence from the Triumph.
It's not
like another
it's
rule,
not
right?
Correct. It's a version of Inspiring Presence, but it's not actually Inspiring Presence. So you're not issuing or receiving a command.
Get affected by that one as well. Back to the list. In nearly every list I build, I have at least 1 unit of Hex Wraith because they're so mobile and so versatile in what they do. Like, one game they will move 24 inches and just block your opponent in their zone. Like they can't really get out of it in a good way. Other games they'll just hang around and be annoying and have that move available. Make sure that your opponent needs to guard their objectives all the time. And then the other unit I love, Mirmon Banshees, as we touched on earlier, the best unit at like denying magic there is. And it's like their aura of like protecting. I mean, in Sweden we have a lot of Seraphons, so like protecting from the comets, the all the like do mortal wounds here and there things has been really good with Mirror Banshees. But also like at Worlds, I got to play into, since it's as soon as a model within 12 is affected or wholly within 12, I put them like next to Archon, and he couldn't like buff Archon up with his spells and stuff. So it was so like they are so brutal when they get to do their thing that and with all endless spells around, I think they should be in every competitive list. If not one unit, then two.
Are the Mirmons reinforced? Are they coming units of 2s or are they coming units of 4s?
They come in units of 4s.
Yeah, cool. Because you get a bonus to the dispel when there's 3 or more models. Yeah. So you get a +1 to the dispel if the endless spell ends within 6 inches. So you get a second bite at the apple to remove endless spells. Great counter for, say, Purple Sun. You're seeing Geminids popping up here and there. You're seeing Ravenashing Jaws. There's a whole bunch of predatory endless spells.
Not just endless spells, like regular spells. If they target a unit within 12, they get another dispel at the, I think it is at the casting value even. So you don't even have to beat the like what they rolled.
One thing I want to talk about before we move into the hero combinations, I'd love to hear a bit more about your hero combos. Is the Hex Wraiths are not Galedian veterans. So being cavalry, it's probably one of your only I mean, obviously you've got a whole bunch of non-battle line troops, but being on horses, great screens, great way to kind of avoid the GVs, especially if your opponent's got bounty hunters and you're trying to protect things.
Yeah. I do miss the old Hex Wraiths though. Like they had so many fun interactions, or wonky interactions, I'd say. Like you could pass through units to do mortal wounds, and then sure they have gotten like impact it's instead now. So they made up for that. But since my old army was made up of like 30 Hex Wraiths, I do miss them a lot, the old rules.
Before we get into those hero combos, Twisted Tree asking, good question, by the way. What's your thoughts on Nagash, given that you've got the new chronomatic cogs, right? You could be re-rolling your casts and, being an absolute machine. That is Nagash, almost half your points, though.
It's a little bit on the expensive side, but I think there's room for him. I think he does best in Nighthaunt. Of all the factions, he has the option to be in. Because bringing back 3 models to each unit, or is it like 3 or 5 units he brings back 3 models to, is really good, especially if you're playing MSU as well. You have many small units, bring back a few models here and there. Yeah, I think Nagash has play. It's just not my play style to have like my whole army in this one model or half my army in that one model. I like many small cogs in my wheels.
And he doesn't have Deathless, right? He doesn't have Deathless because he doesn't.
No Deathless on him.
Yeah.
But he has like 3-up armor save. You get something to use all out defense on. You can use Mystic Shield, and he has like the ward save against mortal wounds as well. So it's semi-durable at least. But
great. I think it's great if you're going to build around, say, Spirit Hosts, because you are bringing back 3 plus. Is it 3 wounds plus a model or some combination? So it can be good to kind of bring back multiple Spirit Hosts. But if you're filling the board up with like Chain Rasps and things like that, maybe not as valuable. But I think you're right. We're kind of not in the meta as well, where we're playing these god heroes. Like, Archaon's kind of been dropped off the table a little bit. You're not seeing Alariel very often. You're not seeing, even Daughters of Cain players are starting to drop Morathi. It's a lot of points. into these god tier heroes. So Nagash is probably a little bit expensive for me, but Alinda and Kurdos, I'd love to hear some of how these two are kind of coming together.
Yeah, this was a test actually for Kurdos. I hadn't tried him before, but I really liked what he provided here in the list, because he's the only model that has rend 3, damage 3 on his attacks base. So he's like, he brought so much damage. I did miss, like I miss having the Guardian of Souls for +1 to wound, but still having the once per game what's called finest hour on him for a wound on 2+ was still pretty nice. Like it was enough. He usually like charged in, did like at least 4 attacks, usually went through by himself, and that's like 12 damage to there. And having rend 3 base on top of like Wave of Terror and stuff, he usually got up to rend 4 or 5, and there's nobody really having an armor save against him then. So he was really useful. And then stealing a command point on a 4-up or 5-up, depending on how close you are to your opponent, it's a nice touch. And I'm really tempted to do like a command point denial list, including a Tomb Banshee as well, so that it costs 2 command points for a unit to issue them. Probably in Grieving Legion, so I can lock it down a bit. Yeah, he has play, I think. I like him. Even if his war scroll is so tiny for how much it costs, it's still like an okay model to bring, I think.
Yeah, he's an interesting model. 7 wounds, 4-up armor save. I probably I haven't really fought him in combat very often. I always find that Kurdos is kind of in the backfields a little bit, and stealing the CP can be impactful. But are you getting the most value? I mean, he's got 5 attacks on the scepter. Maybe I just kill him too quickly. But the rend 3, especially if you're using the stun. Is it stun? Wherever you get the -1 save as well. Going from rend 3 even to rend 4, 3 damage can be absolutely brutal with that scepter in the right target.
Yeah, I play rather offensively with him. Spirit Hosts are there to deliver him mainly also. So
I think you and Jason are feeling the same way, both thinking about a CP denial, because there are so few CPs in the game. Obviously, there are some ways. Like I play goblins, I've got
there
CP
are
up the
faction that
wazoo.
has a lot of them.
Yeah, I got CPs like I'm at a strip club. Like, yeah, I've got too many CPs, not enough actual command to actually issue. But outside of that, being able to stop someone from issuing some of their good, tasty stuff. By the way, I was going to mention like monstrous rampages. Where are you at with the Morngul? That's a model that is not in the book. It's in Forge World.
Yeah.
It's your only monster without bringing in, let's say, Mega Gargant. Do you have any thoughts, assuming the Mongol doesn't change at all? Do you have any thoughts on the Mongol?
I wouldn't bring it. I think it's too expensive for what it provides. Nah. Yes, nah.
Yeah. No, that's fair. That's fair. You've obviously got the Cruciator as well, which is so clutch, right? Master of Magic, the Arcane Tome. So you got yourself a little wizard. I'd love to know in a second how you're using the wizard combination, but the Cruciator being able to, reduce damage by 1 within is it an aura of
yeah.
what's the
on your units wholly within 12, you
12.
can reduce the damage by 1 if your opponents are within 12 of him as well.
Yes. Yep. How are you using the Cruciator? It seems like the Cruciator is one of these units that is a staple in most Nighthaunt lists. It's just too good not to leave home without.
He usually hangs behind the front line with his Spirit Host pals that he passes wounds to. Since the spell is like within 12 as well, so like he needs to be up there, almost in there. But it's nice to have him just behind the front line, because then you can get an extra wave of terror if you feel like you need it. And a hero being like 6 wounds, 4-up save, 5-up or -1 to wound. Like he's kind of durable as well. So I'm not afraid to like put them into combat either. And usually, if people focus down your heroes, then they leave the rest of the army, which is a bit of a trap usually. To like in the new book, I think it's a trap in general to attack the heroes. You need to whittle down the Nighthaunt army. The same with Olinder in this list. She is super durable with a 4-up save. And just attacking her, it takes away a lot of the focus for my opponent. Like, she usually dies turn 2 or 3 when I play her. But then they left so much of my army alive so that it makes up for it. Because they put so much focus on her instead.
Why did you go outside of your allegiance for your command trait, right? Because I'm looking at the command traits, lingering spirit gives your general a 4-up mortal wound save, ruler of the spirit hosts, once per battle at the end of the movement phase, you can do some stuff around summonable units. There's some interesting command traits that you've got access to. Why would you forfeit them to go with a universal master of magic?
I don't really think any of the Nighthaunt command traits are that strong. I tried the the ruler of spirit hosts, but I never got to use it. And something that you situationally use, for those who don't know, it's like bring back half of a unit, a summonable unit, on a 4-up. And something that only works half of the time. Like, you don't get that good mileage out of it compared to Master Magic that you can use every turn. The one I would consider is Cloaked in Shadows or something, I think it's called.
I was just looking at that. The general can't be picked as a target for shooting or combat by more than 1 unit per phase.
Yeah. And that would make him even better to put into combat. But I like Master Magic more because you can use it every turn. I think it's my favorite command trait of all of them, because it's always gonna be useful, essentially.
And the seal of Shaiish is casting value of 5, range of 12. If successfully cast, pick 1 Nighthaunt unit within range and visible. It has a 5-up ward until your next hero phase. So you've got the command ability to give a 5-up ward, and then you've also got the seal of Shaiish to give another 5-up ward.
Yeah. And yeah, it just makes the army more durable. And then you can do, like, in the combat phase, you can have Seal of Shaiish on them, and you, instead of the defensive one, you use all-out attack, something like that.
And just for clarity, Alinda's spell Shade Mist is casting value of 6, range of 12. If successfully cast, pick a friendly Nighthaunt unit, and they subtract 1 to wound rolls for attacks that target the unit. And why that one versus, I don't know, Spectral Tether or Spirit Drain?
I think these 2 spells are the ones that are most universally useful in the Nighthaunt lore. Both defense, like, sure, it would be nice to have some damaging spells, but they are not that good in the book. So I think these 2 are the staple spells you will see in a competitive Nighthaunt army.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to get a boost to wound rolls. I think is the key for me. It's easy to get +1 to hit, but to get +1 to wound is very, very tough.
That's really tricky. And like in this list, like, you have the idea here is like my 2 Grimgust Reaper 20-man units will when I played it, it wasn't Bunt Hunter, it was Hunters of the Heartland as well. So it was like they will tie up stuff, and they will usually have Shade Mist or Seal of Shaiish on them to be able to do their job better. So it's like it plays into the list a lot as well to have these 2 spells.
Yeah, I think the only other spell, outside of these 2 particular spells, the other spell that I probably like is I like Soul Cage, being able to apply the strike last effect. So if you need that ability, you don't have to rely on rolling a 10+ on the charge. But I see why you'd go Seal of Shaiish and Shade Mist over Soul Cage. I almost feel like that's maybe my 3rd choice.
I used to play with Soul Cage in the old book, but then it was Can't Retreat in addition to Always Strike Last. So it got nerfed in the new book, and I don't like it as much. But I haven't given it a chance either, so I won't rule it out completely. The one I would take as a third spell would probably be Spectral Tether, though, just to have that teleporter ability, essentially. But that is much better now with endless spells, and you can teleport and cast an endless spell if you have 2 cast.
Yeah, if you're not going to take Ulrich the Drowner to do the teleporting, Spectral Tether is a great one, and it's a low casting value on 4. If you're taking the Boatman, you probably don't need 2 teleports. I mean, you could use them, but you probably don't need them. Oh, by the way, Anton asking a good question. Why Shade Mist on Alinda and Seal on the Cruciator? Is the Seal more important?
I was thinking more in line with Olinder has no use for Seal of Shaiish if she wouldn't have another target, since she has a 4-up save or ward base. But she could use Shade Mist on herself if there's nothing within 12. So that's why I put the spell on the character I put it on.
Yeah.
Like worst case, they can use them on the spell.
No, good call. Good call. Anything you want to mention with the Grimghast Reapers, your Chain Rasps, your Spirit Hosts? I know we talked a little bit about the Mirmond Banshees and the Hex Raids. Why Grimmies over, I don't know, Dreadblade Harrows or more Chain Rasp, for example? Like why Grimghast?
Grimghast, because they're cheaper than the Revenants. And I think the Revenants are the other unit that had base Rend 1, because that was a big thing, having base Rend 1 and 4-up armor save. Chain Rasp are like, they're nice, but they are only a 5-up, and like that you get so much more use of Ethereal if you're at a 4-up save than a 5-up save. I think it's worth the extra points to get the 4-up. And
Why not
heroes like
Bladegeist?
range, because they are more expensive. They're like 175, right? So 15 more points. That would be 15 gånger 50 or gånger 5 in this list. So there's a lot more points to make room for, and it being just 2,000, then we would to drop the like Chain Rasp or something. And I like having. I generally dislike playing 20-man units because I like a lot of pieces to move around. A lot of different units, but getting mileage out of Grieving Legion with the 20-man units was also so like you need to balance it. I think having many wave of tarot triggers contra having like the effect of the procession there.
And I guess probably the other call out, I'm looking at the differences between the Grimghast Reapers and the Bladegeist Revenants, and there's a lot of commonality between the two. Obviously, points aside, probably the one thing I can imagine you like is the fact that the +1 attack characteristic from the Grimghast come if you're targeting a unit with 5 or more models, while with the Bladegeist you get the +1 attack if they've made the charge. So you're relying on always charging to get the attack boost.
That and the 2-inch melee, since Galatian Veteran wasn't a thing at the tournament. The 2 tournaments I ran this list at.
I was gonna say
2 was a lot better when I play this. I think it's still like viable to play this list, even though the melee range won't be as big of an argument anymore for it.
I was going to say not the Proving Grounds, Bonds of Battle, which allows you to fight in that second rank, means that you don't have to worry about the 2 inches as much, because a big unit of Bladegeist, which are only 1 inch reach, would still get that second attack, that second base in. But obviously, just doing this General's Handbook, but it is more points. So I guess pros and cons either way.
Yeah.
Hannah asking why not Harridans?
Because they lack the rend. They have no rend. That's why I didn't own any Harridans. I still don't own any Harridans, so that's why I haven't brought them anywhere. But cool. I do want to play Quicksilver Dead with the Purple Sun to give them that extra rend. So I'll see where I land on that later on.
How does this list win, Ronya? We'll go to the other list. By the way, folks, there are two lists. A treat for you in the Nighthaunt video. So we'll go to a second version, and it's not even Grieving Legion. We've got a completely different list. How does this particular list work, and how does it win, I guess, at a very high level?
Usually, when the lines engage, you'll try to like tie something up with your Grimglass Reapers that won't be able to like strike properly, because you'll just edge yourself within one of the models in that unit. I think it's happy when it plays into big units that it can like use its no retreat on and just tag. But if people don't bring that many models, like Nighthaunt has such a good mashup into elite armies as is. So I think you don't like suffer too much from not getting the extra attacks on the Grimglass Reapers, or not really getting use of your Grieving Legion ability either, because like it's just Nighthaunt is so strong into that type of army already, so you won't need those. So it's more like to cover up what you might be weak against, which would be like a horde army that has a lot of attacks. Because I think that's what I'm most afraid of. Armies with a lot of semi-quality attacks, at least.
I played, I think the list that I had played had a lot of characteristics the same as yours. I think it was I think they had a lot of Grimglass Reapers, if I remember correctly. And what saved my bacon is I was running Witch Elves, and they had double blades. So it was like 3 attacks, super consistent, like hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s, like, or I think it might even have been at 2s at some point. And I could do exploding 6s. And I think it took me like 60 hits to pull down a unit of 20 Grimglass Reapers. When you think about the Ward, the Cruciator, I'm doing one damage attacks, but a lot of people cannot throw that amount of damage onto you. So you, with the 5-up Ward, reduce the damage by 1 with the Cruciator, the 4-up base armor save. Those 20 wounds are not 20 wounds. It's more like what's 50 or something statistically.
Closer to 50
ridiculous.
wounds probably to take one of the units down, yeah.
Are your spirit hosts protecting Alinda, the Cruciator? Who are they bodyguarding
Kurdos
for?
or Cruciator would be the protected targets.
What's the difference?
Alinda does fine with her 4-up ward save base.
Okay. Any reason why you've gone bounty battle regiment instead of, say, like, I don't know, warlord? I mean, obviously you've got 2 named characters, so you don't need the extra artifact. But
yeah,
is there, why do you need the low drops? Do you need the 3?
I like low drops. Like I played a lot of like 10, 11 drop lists, and it was always such an hassle to be able, like, always opponent to get to choose if I go second or first, and like it's just easier to play the game if you have that decision. I think a lot of the time I won't even like go second with it, because I like to like get ahead on scenario too, like, so. But having the option of having like a looming possible double turn or getting to like clash first is also so nice. So I like options when I play, and that gives me another option.
Yeah, you like options and you like guarantees. The less randomness. You're not playing like Gargants like me. Like that's like hitting the jackpot. You're gonna
Gargants
like
could be okay, because like I think there are very tactical elements to playing Gargants as well. But say something like Old Skaven, where it was a lot of RNG. Nah, I love me some Ratmans, but I'd rather play them in Blood Bowl, where I have my trusty gutter runners to bamboozle my opponent with.
Oh, I love it. Now you bamboozle them by lifting the veil. The other list you've got for me is the Quicksilver Dead. So you've got Take What Is Theirs as the Grand Strat, and your Triumph is Bloodthirsty. Still have Alinda, still have the Cruciator, though Cruciator. Oh no, you got 2 Cruciators. I was literally about to say the Cruciator is not the general, but then I'd quickly contradict myself by saying The Crusaders are
You
generals. You got two
double down on them.
Crusaders. Yep. You've got Reichner, you got a Linda, you got two Cruciators. One has the light shard of the Harvest Moon. The other is the general with the cloak in shadows. You've got yourself 20 Dreadside Harridans, 10 Dreadside Harridans, 10 Dreadside Harridans, 10 Dreadside Harridans. So you got 4 units of Harridans, one's being reinforced. 5 Hex Raids, 4 Moonbond Banshees. You've got Purple Sun, can't leave home without the sun. Still using Battle Regiment and Bounty Hunter, so we've still got that same combination. It is a little bit cheaper, though, at 1965, so there's a good chance you get the Triumph. It is 4 drops, though, so you're a little bit higher, Ronya, than what you normally like at 3. But you're at 90 wounds, so less wounds than the last list. But I'm sure with the double Cruciator, you're reducing the damage across the board a bit better. So what's this list all about, and how is it different to the last one? Obviously, we've gone...
Bit of a work in progress. I've ran through a couple of Quicksilver Deads. Before this edition, I had a Black Coach in it, because I wasn't sure about the new scenarios, but I found like it wasn't troublesome for Nighthaunt to deal with the new battle tactics. It plays into their playstyle as is. I probably like have a new idea on this one, and that is another like the command trait would be Master Magic, and I would have an Arcane Tome in this too, because having reroll on the Purple Sun is really handy, even if Reiknor is there to like cast it. So. It's I'm not super fond of Reiknor, essentially, here.
So I was just looking at the light shard of the Harvest Moon is a once per battle at the start of the combat phase. You could say the bearer uses the baleful gloom of the light shard. If you do so, add 1 to the attack characteristic of melee with friendly Nighthaunt wholly within 12 inches of the bearer. So
it's like more attacks, essentially what Nighthaunt already does, but you do more of it. You need to kill something. But yeah, and the list is like, since I have Dreadset Harridans, who needs like something need to have taken damage earlier in the turn for them to get +1 to hit, +1 to wound. So there's like, I haven't sure that, but by having like 4 characters who deal damage in earlier phases, on top of having Hex Rate that could, if I haven't managed that, do it with impact hits to ensure like this 3-up instead of 4-up with all my Herydians.
Couple of questions from the chat, couple of good ones actually. Jason asking the first one, I notice you don't use Spirit of Torment. Do you think they're not worth taking?
No, I really like Spirit Torments. The earlier edition of this list had the Torment in it, but I find it hard to fit all the pieces I want in a list. This one you could probably move things around to fit the Spirit Torment here. It's like the 2 pieces I really want to fit in most lists, but seem to never be able to, is Tomb Banshee and Spirit Torment. Those 2 I really like, but rarely have the room for. Even if he is like one of the cheaper character at 115 points, there's always seem to be not room for it. I'm also like having a character or having a full unit now when the character aren't as like vital for the Nighthaunt army. It always like you trade so much damage output for having this utility ability. It's a feel bad a lot of the time.
Yeah, you're definitely less reliant. Like in the older book, you'd take things like Tomb Banshees and Can Wraiths just to get the ward bubbles and some of the model regeneration, just because you were so reliant on taking heroes. But that reliance has definitely dropped off in this book. The other question that Jason asked, which is a good one, was why not the Midnight Tome for the auto cast?
Yeah, like you could bring that, absolutely. It worked just as well as like like the Harvest Moon thing I got. I just feel like I do have Reiknor who can have +3 to cast the sun, so would probably get it off in the majority of rounds I need it anyways. So like, it's not a bad option, but it's not the one I'd go with either.
It's fine. I mean, like, it's not a bad option, like the Midnight Tome. And I guess there's pros and cons, right? You know, the last one we had Master of Magic along with the Arcane Tome. This one's obviously a one-trick pony. It's a once per battle. And then if it's unbound, it's unbound. If you're using Purple Sun, it's a cousining value of 8. So to unbind it, it can be quite difficult. But
with the item, you can't unbound the Purple Sun. You cast them on 12 and it can't be unbound.
No, it could be dispelled. It could be dispelled later.
Oh yeah, in the opponent's turn, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Like once you've got it on the table, yeah, you get one round of it, but there's a chance that you lose it, and then there's no benefit from the artifact. So you've got to make the most of that one Purple Sun on the table.
Same is true for the Harvest Moon. Like it's a 1-turn ability, so then it's done. So there's no argument for it.
Josh saying, congratulations on the success that you're having with the General's Handbook, settling a little bit. Do you rate Quicksilver dead in the current season? So I think, speaking on behalf of Ronya, and I'll get you to continue it, yes, I think we talked a little bit at the top of the show. You're a big fan of the Quicksilver dead?
Yeah, that's one of the two sub-factions I'm fond of.
Ryan asked, sorry, go on.
Yeah, it's like, I don't like the Doom, Red Doom, or what the Scarlet Doom, cause it's too simple. Otherwise, I would be all for Scarlet Doom as well. But it's too simple of a sub-faction. I want tricks and stuff.
It's a good one to start with, and then like once you get your confidence, you're like, I want to get something else.
Then you can move over to other, for sure.
Quicksilver Dead or Grieving Legion are probably the two. Ryan asking, by the way, and I noticed this as well, you know, both lists had 5 hex wraiths in them. Are you using them as alpha speed bumps? Ryan asks, moving them up 24 inches in the enemy army's turn 1. What and how are you using the hex wraiths?
Usually no, they are usually on a flank by themselves, and I have the rest of army like on the other flank, because they're so fast. Like they are, when I face Iron Jaws, yes, then they will move 24, be like at 11.7 inches in front of the whole Iron Jaws army, just to keep it in the deployment and not use the Mighty Destroyers turn 1. But against other armies, generally no. I won't use them that way. They are in general a screen though.
Yeah, and especially again with the GVs and running around in the current book, you're not giving them away, so they're a great screen that you're not giving away extra damage to a bounty hunter. Thomas asking, what would be the best unit to ally into Nighthaunt from other Death armies? Who are your allies? I actually completely forgot. Who are your allies? You can ally
Soulblight
in...
Gravelords are the allies.
Oh,
and I'd say like a unit of skeletons or something, because they are the cheapest battle line unit. You have no real... I was looking at Kowalyk or the other like non-character monster there, just to have a monster in the list, but decided that they are a little bit too expensive for what they provide. And allying from Nighthaunt, I don't think there's any real... Like Nighthaunt is really allegiance ability bound, so I don't think they make good allies for other death.
I know I'm cheating here a little bit. Would you bring in a Kronspine or a Mega Gargant?
Not Mega Gargant anymore. I saw an argument for him in the old book where there were no real hammer. Now that issue is solved, so I wouldn't bring in a Mega Gargant. Kronspine, I do like no retreating and the like extra layer he brings. So yeah, there could be room for a Kronspine in Nighthaunt, especially if you like don't feel like bringing 50 Bladeless Revenants. So you bring like 20 or 30, and then you bring a Kronspine. I think it could be, yeah, there's place for him.
Yeah, You just got to watch out with the command ability, because if you issue all out attack and it'll give a bubble of all out attack, that'll obviously deny you from your ward command ability from the faction. So you just got to watch out for that one. But yeah, I mean, +1 a hit bubble is nice. No retreat. +1 to casting for the wizard if it's within 18. So if you don't take Master of Magic, that could be nice.
Another thing to watch out for is locking yourself into combat, because you need to be aware of how you pile and how you pull like your casualties, so that your units are not wholly within the domination aura of the front spine.
And you did talk earlier in the video how you really enjoyed the retreat and charge. So that would just straight out lock you out of doing that. So yeah, be mindful.
Yeah, and I don't think it does that well in Quicksilver Dead, since all the the Harridians should have +1 to hit and wound either already. So I think the subfaction he belongs in is either Green Legion or the Scarlet Doom one. Mainly Scarlet Doom, because Green Legion already has that no retreat thingy if you have built it that way.
Do you like any of the endless spells? I mean, the Terminexus used to be really popular in the first book. I don't know if it's changed between books, but I know that it was a popular endless spell. Do you have any favorites?
Do
you like it? Do you like
Spirit Vault thingy, like the Box of Spirits or whatever it is?
The Vault of Souls?
Yeah. I think that one looks interesting. But struggle to find the point for like everything I want, so fitting an endless spell is kind of hard. And I don't think Nighthaunt they don't really need endless spells either. It's like a strong enough army that doesn't suffer from other endless spell that much already. So there's not a need for any of the endless spells. But if I were to bring one, it would be the Vault of Souls.
So I was just reading the Terminexus, and just like you can basically do damage, or you can do healing within 6 inches, or like a little aura.
And that's the hourglass thing, right?
Yeah, that's the hourglass. Jason saying that's why he likes the boatman with Crom Spine. So Lolchen, the Soul Seeker, so you can almost like teleport away from Crom. But then like you're putting so many points together. It's a lot of points.
You're 9 away from your opponent then, at least. So there's like they can't be that relied on to engage again if you do that. So, but yeah, that's a way to like if you have messed up and pull them away for sure.
Talk to me about the Black Coach, because when the book came out, I saw a lot of players take the Black Coach. It seemed to be quite a popular addition, and I think people were excited. But I'm noticing as lists kind of progress, it is dropping off. And I don't know why it's dropping off. Is it just that there are better choices in the book and those points can be allocated elsewhere? Because it did have some small changes. What have you kind of picked up, and what do you think?
Changes.
Yeah,
it had huge changes. Like the old book, I played with 2 of them nearly every game because I had a recursion list, which is main function in the old book. Nowadays, it's a really durable piece, but it's a bit too expensive in my opinion. Like it doesn't have that great damage output, but it's tanky. Also, like a con with it, it's only 2 models on an objective. And you're investing like 335-ish points into it, which could be like 2 10-man units instead.
Yeah, because it lost up its power.
You give up a lot by taking the Black Coach, and if the battle tactics would have been as troublesome as I thought they were at the start, I would for sure have brought a Black Coach just to have the extra battle tactic available. But time has shown that it's easier than I thought to complete the battle tactics without it, and like it doesn't generate the power as quickly as I would like it to. And
No,
the extra feels bad is like when you unleash that power, on a 2-up or on a 1, nothing happens because you need to roll a 2-up still for it, like to do the shooting damage it has the potential to do. 3d3 mortal wounds, if I recall correctly there as well.
Yeah, it's got some good rules. Like it's definitely lost the power up ability and why people would take it. Obviously, if you power it up really quickly, it could do some really good stuff. You're probably getting more consistency from it, but the role has probably fundamentally changed as well. I mean, the 5-up ward's nice. You can do some of the move and retreat stuff through the underworld. So it's got like its own little teleport built into it. So there's a lot of good things into it, but
330 points. It's a lot to pay out for that one in an army that is already like tight on points, I feel.
I think we could talk about this book forever, and I'm kind of getting into the weeds, right? We haven't talked about Lord Executioner, we haven't talked about the Guardian of Souls, the Knight of Shrouds, poor old horse and on foot Knight of Shrouds. There's just so many choices here, and I've got another video coming up as well in the near future, so I'll get Nate's Trentinelli's opinion as well. But what I'd love to hear from you as we kind of like bring this home is, how does this army work? What's the keys to success? And I guess, what have you kind of learnt as a Nighthaunt player? If I was someone that maybe is going maybe 2 wins at a tournament or maybe 3 wins at a tournament and I want to get better, what have you kind of learnt that you can kind of teach me when it comes to the faction?
I think the faction is, first off, not for everybody. But if you like mobility and have an aggressive playstyle, then I think Nighthaunt is an army for you. Because the more aggressive you are, the more it will reward you, essentially. But you still need to control that aggression and not like overextend. That was the main thing, especially about the old book. When you overextend, you generally lose in the book, because it is fragile. If you leave an arm or a unit on its own, it will probably die. More so in the old book, but still in the new, it needs it like you need to play a ball of death essentially, and have your army like the units support each other so well through Wave of Terror. You have the Guardian of Souls who has the aura, the Krugas Crusader has his aura, Olinder has her aura. We didn't talk about that, but on a 5-up, she denies the command point or the command ability if it's issued within 12 of her. So that one is really, really useful as well. So there's still a lot of buffs in the army. And learning to manage those, but also at the same time pushing the limit of what the army can do. Is probably how you get the most value out of a Nighthaunt list.
Do you think Galinda, with her returning D6 slain models, was it once per battle?
That's more of a bonus, I think.
Yeah, I was just going to say, do you think a lot of lists have to run a Linda, or do you think...
No, absolutely not. I think you could run 2 other characters or a character and a unit instead of a Linder, and still do just as well. I tried a Linder at the start, was unsure if she was worth it, mainly because I played her wrong. I played her too aggressive. At the first tournament I attended, I lost her first turn 1, then turn 2, turn 3, and then turn 2 again. But she's still when I thought back to the tournament, I realized she absorbed so much damage. One of these times she died, it was a 4-man unit fulminators that charged her. If that would have gone into my army, then all that damage would have killed 1 or 2 units instead. So the more I thought back with it, the more it was fine sacrificing her here, because she still filled a role. She took care of that damage so that my army could just take care of his army then. I think she's good.
So how do you not lose her early? So you mentioned at the tournament you lost her quickly early, and then you kind of learnt to kind of keep her on the table longer. What did you learn? How did you protect her?
Don't frontline with her into like mega gargants and stuff, because that's how she dies. She's like, yeah, play her correctly, and she will be fantastic. But she's not a must in an army either, so like it's just a preference for me. I have her in nearly every list I build. Tried some games without her, and I felt like I was missing her, so put her back in.
When you lift the veil, do you target like 1 wound models in order to do a mortal wound and then heal the D3?
If I need the healing, yes. I tend to try to execute something with her. Otherwise, I like putting in D6 damage into like a Great Unclean One or a Mega Gargant or so. Like it makes just, it's a very flexible ability on how I use it.
Yeah. I mean, like just being able to like take some damage, obviously the 4-up ward, you know, having the ability to heal as a heroic action. And then if she's still kind of got wounds on her profile with a shooting attack, getting a heal as well, can keep her around for a long period of time, which again, for 300 odd points, as you said, she can soak up a lot of damage. And then the fact that the 5-up deny the command, you can bring back models once per game. You've got a good little spell through Grief Stricken. Just an overall great utility piece.
Like 2 cast into the spell. It's quite nice to have as well.
And she's not even a commander. She's a sub commander with 7 wounds. So
yeah,
you're absolutely laughing.
And can use like command abilities within 18, since she now is generally in addition.
Yeah, because she's a War Master.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, she's great. But she is a Grieving Legion though, so anything keyword dependent, obviously.
None of the sub factions will. It won't matter like in none of the sub factions. So that she is Grieving Legion.
That's good. That's good. Cause I noticed that she's got Grieving Legion. I'm like, oh, how's that impacted with like Emerald Host and things? But I guess it doesn't really.
Yeah, it doesn't affect it. Like the only thing that's affected by that is like the unit. I think not even that. No, there's like a few characters that is sub faction specific, but it doesn't impact it at all.
No, actually, I was just looking at the sub factions, and I'm like, oh wait, no, that doesn't actually really do anything.
Matter.
Like I'm like, oh yeah, no, it doesn't actually, because she's not a Dreadblade Harridan, she's not a Blade Geist Revenant. Emerald Curse has nothing to do with it. So I'm like,
doesn't matter.
Yeah. No, so we're sweet. How do I deploy as a Nighthaunt player? Like, how do I deploy? Like, any tips you'd give me to not deploy badly?
I'd say like it's scenario dependent. Like you want to be able to threaten at least half of the scenario like elements in general. Also, like that's where the like picking up 3 units and deploy, like having them in reserve comes in. If you can't like threaten it from your deployment zone, pick up some units, then you will threaten it. If not, like at least force your opponent to move on to that objective so that you can teleport or show up on it. I'm like have a bit of OCD, so I usually deploy like in I want my symmetry in my deployment, rather than like I try to be as effective as possible, but still keeping the symmetry. So I'm probably not the best deployment person ever, since it would bug me too much if it was completely off. But in general, like keep a screen of a unit in front of a character, deploy the thing you need to think about is like the auras from Mirmon Banshees, from your characters, the buffs and stuff, and like make sure your spirit hosts are able to like take damage from your characters. So it's not like the army is quick enough that it won't punish you too much if you fuck up, and everything is flying, so you won't block yourself either. So that like it's a forgiving army to like deploy like a madman, essentially.
Yeah, you can deploy on the line, and having a lot of base movement 8 means you can get onto objectives pretty easily. And you might want to use a forward to victory and basically just absolutely just drop onto an objective and like stop people from even getting on. there's just so much good stuff in here. But you're right, you know, being able to retreat and charge. So even if like Iron Jaws came into you turn 1 and pinned you into your into your deployment zone, you've got the retreat and charge ability, so you can get yourself out pretty quickly and get into some juicier targets. And there's a lot of movement flexibility that you've got access to. And as you mentioned, the flying and, you know, some of the teleport builds and all of that as well. So I think the key there is like think about movement as your win strategy, as opposed to just looking at the fact that, you know, you've got abilities like 6s to hit equal damage and you've got some access to additional rens and things. Like don't just look at the combat profiles, look at how you can win. And I think that's kind of how, when Nighthaunt players fight against me, the way that they beat me, or what the way that they try to beat me, is use movement to your advantage. I just can't, most of my armies that I run just can't beat you in the movement game. And you start pulling me apart. You start taking objectives that I can't defend, or you pull me one way and then you kind of jump into another. So you win in a movement game.
I think that has been like the key to success in Age of Sigmar for most armies. Like if you can at least like have something to say about the movement phase, especially early. So like pre-game moves are also like big for, like, we have seen the big Stabas, the Nurgle army like do well since they move far on the first turn, and I think that's key in a lot of cases, that you win the game in the movement phase in general.
Yeah, and what's great as well, probably better for you versus the last edition, is that there are more battle plans with have more objectives. So some armies can really struggle to try to retain and claim up to 8, you know, or there are some like Realmstone Cache, or there's a few of them where I can't think of the other one at the moment, that requires a high degree of activation, or the proving ground means you've got to go to a certain area. And if I'm on one side of the board and my only Gladian veterans, I can be near impossible to get the objective, you've got the teleports, you've got the moves to better claim those objectives. So again, you're in a really good spot.
I think a lot of the battle, like the missions, they promote combat now. They promote combat a lot, more than the last battle type did, and the battle tactics as well. Like a lot of them revolves around killing a unit or something like that. You need to like be up close and engage. So an army like Nighthaunt will thrive in that kind of environment, compared to a castle army, like the leading of the First Prince or a Seraphon army. I think Seraphon players need to rethink how they play as well, and not do the castle thing as much as they did in AoS 2. So it will be exciting to see how it impacts the meta.
Yeah, you're definitely leading the meta. And I think if you're, and this is probably going to lead me to my last question before we kind of bring this home, is how do I beat you? And I'm asking this both as a player against Nighthaunt, but also as a Nighthaunt player who might need to think about how do I not give my opponent the victory? You know, are there particular models or units that my linchpins, and if I lose them, the game is over? Is there mistakes that I need to kind of avoid in order to not give away the game? Anything you tell me about either beating you on the table, or not you personally, but Nighthaunt, or maybe some things that I need to really look out for as a Nighthaunt player in order to protect the win.
I think the Nighthaunt army book, like, it's really strong. Like there's no like good, how do I beat this? Because the army is like, it's super strong. Like you need volume of attacks, and semi quality on them. So 3-up is a good way to go in the Dortal of Cain, especially good at this one. And like having damage 2 is kind of pointless, since there will be a Crusader most of the time, if the Nighthaunt player positions correctly. So like a lot of damage 1 attacks, or damage 3, I think would be suffice now. Like the Piggies in Iron Yaws is a good example. They will be damage 3 with the War Chanter and the the Bounty Hunter. So
Yeah,
they will be useful against Nighthaunt, I think. I
know my
I think
Stormcast, for example, I brought Judicators with crossbows, so they have a lot of attacks, exploding sixes. Yeah, so I'm playing the Free Guild crossbowman, for example. Anything that I can get a good attack on, damage 1, but I'm getting a high volume, because I think for me, one of the ways that and you learn this when you play against Death, but probably more so against Nighthaunt, is not to split your attacks. You could look at a unit of 20 or even 10, like 10 chain gas, and go, yeah, one unit can handle this. Probably not. With the Cruciator, the Ward, the unrenderable armor save, you need a lot more damage than you think to pull down a unit. That's my lesson.
Absolutely. And even if you just leave 2 models from a unit now, they will still provide like the Wave of Terror buff. So they will do a lot for just being 2 models. In the All Nighthaunt book, they had a lot of recursion, so you couldn't leave models there, but for other reasons. Nowadays, it's just they will buff the rest of the army so much that you can't really leave anything from a unit possible. Then how to lose with Nighthaunt would probably be the most common would be overextending and not keeping within your auras. I think is would be most common way to lose with Nighthaunt, because the book is, as I said, really strong baseline.
Yeah, it's a good book. I thoroughly enjoy it. I think there's definitely some stronger builds at the moment with the Gladian. Are you worried about Gladian veterans at all? Like, obviously the +1 damage with bounty hunters, you get access to more battle tactics. Some of the proving ground comes into play. What's your general thought with that with Nighthaunt?
I think it's hard to play Nighthaunt without having Galatian veterans. So you just need to adapt and play that's why I have 2 Cruciators in one list as well, to ignore that extra bounty hunter damage. Sure, it would be nice to have not the extra bounty hunter damage and ignore a regular damage, but I don't think there's a good way around playing without Galatian veterans either. Because
you wouldn't build
a
whole.
Not Galatian veterans per se is too strong, but the models in the Nighthaunt army that is Galatian veterans are too strong to not bring to a list.
So you wouldn't build a whole Hexwraith army, for example, to avoid GVs?
Nah, absolutely not. I love Hexwraiths, but they're not that competitive that I would bring a whole army of them anymore.
Would you? I got one more burning question. I lied to you.
Absolutely.
I thought I was going to wrap it up. I just had this idea while we talk about Galatian veterans. I was thinking about Spirit Host, and I was quickly having a look to see if Spirit Hosts were battle line, and yes, they are. I was just thinking, right? You didn't often see reinforced or double reinforced Spirit Host because they've only got a range 1 attack. But now that you've got the bonds of battle, so his Spirit Hosts are 4 wounds and less, they are battle line. So it means they can fight in essentially 2 ranks. Do you think maybe Spirit Host could be an offensive tool, double reinforced or single reinforced? Would that be something you'd consider?
Not really, no. Nah, not really. I used to run a reinforced unit, but that was when they had mortal wounds on 6s to hit. Nowadays, they got +1 to hit, and it's at 4 to hit now, but they don't do the mortal wound anymore, so not really a combat unit. Even if they can provide a bit of assistance, they don't do enough.
I was literally going to say the change to Frightful Touch would stop me from running reinforced Spirit Host, because they get 6 attacks, but they're hitting on 4s, wounding on 4s, no rend for 1. Even if you have the damage isn't that great. You can roll a couple of 6s, but you used to fish for the mortals. Now you don't have access to that. So
most other units, for the same point, they will have higher damage output than the Spirit Host has as well. So I think it's better to look at some of the other units to do the same.
Cool. Anything else you'd add to this conversation? I mean, we've almost been 2 hours, Ronya, so you've been an absolute legend. Again, I probably could ask you a million questions, but I'm going to respect your time.
I could probably talk about this for ages. Like I love talking miniature games and all things nerdy. Like it's what I do most of the days, even if I should be working. So yeah,
That's right.
Don't tell anyone. No, I love hanging on like Discord or Messenger group chats and just talking about the game or any other miniature game or thing I'm interested in. So
I'm going to finish with one interesting final question.
yeah.
If you could add one unit to Nighthaunt, if you could make up a unit, what would it look like, or what would you want?
I'd want a monster that is worth bringing. That's probably what I have been missing the most when I build a Nighthaunt list. Or just a cheap unit. Like we're talking probably Globadier cheap. Like you have 45 or 65 points for a 5-man unit that could just be there or be on an objective. But doesn't need to provide much, just bodies, essentially.
What's the monster? What type of spirit? Are we talking like spirit Star Drake? Are we talking
No. I've always been a fan of Dragon Ogres, so it would probably be the spirit of Kowalyk Sun Eater or something cool like that.
I was thinking
that would be the dream monster to have.
I thought Spirit Maw Crusher. Like imagine that big ball of spirit just coming at you.
Rule for a Maw Crusher and be a big cabbage or something, but dragons are cooler, or dragon ogres are even cooler. So that's more in line with what I'd want. I'm in the process of building a dragon ogre army, so but a bird dragon ogre army, Beast of Sench. We'll see how that plays out.
Ronya, this has been an awesome conversation, and I know we could keep talking. If people want to chat to you, I've got your Twitter handle below in the episode description. Go follow Ronya. Again, great player. You are very, very good in the competitive scene, both at like a master's level, representing your country in the AoS Worlds for Sweden. And I'm sure you'll cap the crown probably this year. Konstantinos, you're on notice, my friend. Yeah, you're on notice, Ronya's going to take the crown. But anywhere else people can find you if they want to chat to you or get some like list advice, or just share maybe some of their experience or thoughts. Where can we find you?
Yeah, Twitter's probably the easiest ones, because Discord is a bit wonky with the servers. Like you need to be on safe server and stuff, and I don't hang around that many miniature game servers on Discord. So probably Twitter or like Facebook or something like that is where I hang a lot of the time.
Cool. Well, go follow you. Hopefully you get a whole bunch of extra followers in the episode description. If it's not in there, I'll put it in automatically. Any shout outs? Anyone that you want to kind of give love and representation to?
No, I don't know. Put me on a spot like this.
Shout out to Sweden, just the whole country.
Nah, the tournament scene actually. Like I love challenging games in the tournament scene, and that's what it provides most of the time, or some of the time at least. But like the people in the like high, like no like throwing trash at like other players, but like in the highly competitive scene, people are always so fucking nice, and it's like I'm so happy to have like gotten into this community. It was the same in the War Machine community. Everybody like was so great, and I feel the same here. Like I'm not run into a single person I dislike, essentially.
Yeah, we haven't met yet. I'm sure I'll be number one on that list when we do meet.
Somebody needs to be so.
No, you're right. Look, I say this to everyone who's never been to a tournament and they want to go to a tournament. End of the day, it's just a bunch of nerds who want to play with their war dollies, and you have that in common. You can't go pro. You can't go out and win $1 million. It's not Magic the Gathering. For most people, they just want to have fun. They want to hopefully win more than they lose, and they're not going to stomp you in the ground and win at all costs. So that's true probably across the world.
Yeah, and sounds like you are there for the same reason. There's always a conversation starter just in front of you there, and usually leads to like a beer or something and more talk, and like it's so easy to just talk to people at events. I feel like even if I suffer from pretty bad social anxiety, but when I'm around my miniatures and like I'm comfortable with them, I just forget about it and talk to people because we have this thing in common, and it's so great, so fucking great.
Well, I think with that, you've ended it really nicely. Ronya, thank you so much for this. Go follow her. Absolutely fantastic player. Very insightful for the 2 hours you've shared with us. If you have listened to it this long, I'd love to hear from you in the comment section what your thoughts are. What's your model that you want to add to the faction if you had a chance, right? What's the monster that you want to add? Or is there anything that kind of we haven't kind of talked about, or maybe some combinations? Let us know. Again, it's a new book, right? So we're all kind of learning together the combinations and what works well and the synergies. And, you know, I've tried this and this works really well. And, you know, with Lumineth and Tzeentch coming down the line, lists are going to have to adapt and change, right? So absolute legend. And thank you for everyone who listened to this. Thank you for my patrons, my YouTube members. Thank you for everyone who joined the live stream, or for the people who just watched us on replay. I appreciate you all. And Ronya, I'm going to let you go back today, and hopefully work doesn't notice that you've disappeared for like 2 odd hours.
Nah, probably not. I think they're fine without me. It's
You're
not
too
burning,
good.
at least.
All right, let's go. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Ronya. Thanks, everyone who listened. Peace out. Thanks for hanging around until the end. I hope you enjoyed that video and you walked away with a few new ideas. If you did, I would love it if you press like on the video, as well as left me a comment to let me know what your thoughts are. The conversation will continue over on Discord, and the link is down below in the video description. I want to give a massive shout out as well to the AoS Coach Patreons and YouTube members who are going in, and the funds are supporting the channel and the growth that you're seeing here. So cheers, you're all bloody legends. And until next time, don't roll a 1 on a redeploy.